Faults and problems and mistakes can cost companies much more than just money, of course. Reputations can be destroyed forever. So, how do companies manage the aftermath of these disasters? I sat down with Peter LaMotte, Senior Vice President of the crisis firm Levick, and I asked him who the target audience is for post-crisis PR campaigns.
There are those that are never going to change their mind. There are those that are brand advocates that are on board no matter what. Much like a political campaign, they're going for the independents. They're trying to find those that are swayable. So when they put together these campaigns, as Honda's doing right now related to the recall, it's much like an advertising campaign. It's much like a political campaign. They are trying to sway the voter. In this case, the vote is, am I going to go buy a Honda? And this is a broad campaign. This is millions upon millions of dollars trying to change the perspective and change the perception of their brand. So hopefully what that means is dollars well spent.
Another example, General Motors had a little issue with some recalls and some deaths that were blamed on some of the issues that they have with the ignition system. The irony that people don't realize is that year, General Motors had one of the best years ever in terms of selling cars. And we equate, well, we think the cars aren't safe, or we think a company has a certain reputation. But how is it possible that you have a record number of customers still wanting to purchase these vehicles? Doesn't that defy everything that we know, that we're taught, whether you're in business school or out there in the real world?
Sure. Well, when you compare Honda to GM, Honda has been known, their brand was about reliability. It was about safety. And with GM, they were in the process of improving upon their brand. Their advertising was all about changing that perspective. What Honda's doing is they're trying to save that brand. They're looking at this as people are going to start thinking of us as something other than safe, something other than reliable. And that's why they're trying to really stop the bleeding. They're trying to stop the bleeding for multiple reasons. They're trying to prevent regulators from getting involved, but they're trying to stop the loss of sales, which has happened across the globe, but now in the U.S. as well.
One of the issues from, I won't name the car company, that this occurred in the past, customers were much more upset, not about the fact there were defective parts or there was recalls. They were much more upset about the cover-up, if you will, the sweeping under the rug, the lack of transparency, and sort of the blame game, right? Oh, it wasn't me, it was you, it wasn't the supplier, it was that one, and you point at different factories. And customers didn't like that. So when a company comes to you and they're faced with a crisis like this, step one, what do you tell them?
Assess. Make sure, see where the risks really lie. Because people do look at a company almost as an individual. They want trust. They want transparency. And that's what you see these firms doing. You see Honda, you see SeaWorld. What they're trying to do is say, we're human, we care. And if you don't show that empathy for your customers, that's where you really get into trouble. But I will say, every crisis should not be responsive. You should be prepared. You should be building your brand, because every company is going to have a crisis at some point. And if you're in a situation where you're only reacting, you're starting off on the wrong foot.
The media is one of those groups. We react, right? Problem occurs, we see the press release, we see an announcement, the media sends all teams on board, go find out what happened that was wrong. We don't find out what happened, what was right. We always find out what was wrong. Companies' response. Should they respond or should they not respond at all? And I've seen it work out both ways, and I'm just curious on your guidance. Sometimes maybe it's better not to say too much.
There's always an opportunity to say too much. You can get yourself as a company into a lot of trouble by divulging too much information. You and the media are trying to sell a product. They are often trying to sell a product. And you need to look at the situation as how it's going to affect your bottom line. And when a communications firm or a communications team inside of an organization, that's what they're looking at. Who's going to be affected? How is this going to hurt the company in the long run? How do we stop the hemorrhaging of, is it sales? Is it regulators coming in? Is it just bad publicity? Threats of a crisis, risks are all over. And a company has lawyers and PR executives and everyone trying to mitigate as much as possible. But they always have to have an eye out for what could possibly affect them. And then when that does happen, have a solid plan on how they're going to react.
Oftentimes, companies fire people in these crises, right?
Right.
Not laying blame on who's right and wrong, but that's usually one of the solutions. Fire a couple senior individuals who were responsible or could have been responsible for it, and customers say, hey, action was taken, problem is solved.
Right.
Etc.
Once again, it's going to depend on the situation. If there is a tremendous amount of guilt, if, once again, solving the problem will be just taking that simple action, but there's so many actions that a company can take. But what's important about that is that the public, the consumers, or more importantly, the stakeholders, are looking at the company as addressing the issue. People don't want to find out that the company has covered up their problems. People want to know that they're dealing with their problems. And how they communicate that is what's important.
Trust.
Trust.
Is that the most important thing?
Trust is always important. Trust is important from...
Beyond quality, beyond price?
Well, trust can dissolve all of the great things that a company has done to build a product, to build a brand. If you have a great product, if you have a well-priced product, and there's no trust, then you have a serious issue.